In a quiet corner of the world, nestled between gentle hills and a winding river, there was a little town called Mirian. It was the kind of place where the air smelled like rosemary and olive trees, and time moved just a little slower. At the edge of this town stood a modest stone cottage, and in it lived a man named Elias Thorne. Elias was not like most of the villagers. While they farmed and fished, built homes and told stories by the firelight, Elias kept to himself. His life revolved around the stars. Not metaphorically, he was a true astronomer. But unlike those in cities who peered through great telescopes in observatories, Elias used only his eyes, his notes, and his deep curiosity. He believed that the stars whispered secrets, if only one were quiet enough to listen. Each evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and twilight painted the sky with indigo and gold, Elias would climb a small hill behind his cottage. He carried nothing but a leather-bound journal, a quill, and a worn wool blanket. He would lie on his back and gaze upward, eyes wide and soul still. Tonight was no different. The sky unfolded above him like a vast velvet canvas studded with shimmering lights. The constellations gleamed softly, old friends returning to tell their stories again. But tonight, something was different, not in the sky, but within Elias. There was a restlessness in his heart. A longing not just to observe the stars, but to touch them, to be among them. He closed his eyes and imagined himself floating through the cosmos, drifting weightlessly past Saturn's rings, waving to comets as they blazed by, feeling the cold silence of space wrap around him like a cloak. He exhaled slowly. That fantasy was a familiar one, and comforting. But this night, he found himself wondering something else. What had he given up in order to dream so far beyond? Elias had once been a lively boy, full of wonder not just for the sky but for the earth, too. He had tasted fresh pomegranates from the orchard near the river, danced during village festivals, even fallen in love once with a baker's daughter named Lyra. But that was long ago. Now, his days passed quietly. He slept during the bright hours, emerging only when the world was still and everyone else was asleep. His home was Spartan: a bed, a desk, a shelf full of astronomy scrolls. There were no visitors, no laughter, no bread baking in his oven. Only silence. Only stars. That night, he noticed the moon rising in a strange hue, amber instead of silver. Curious, he stood up and decided to walk further than usual, toward the cliffs at the far end of the village. From there, he could see the ocean and the sky merging into one boundless horizon. As he walked through the dark fields, he barely noticed the chill in the air or the prick of thistles brushing his ankles. His eyes were locked on the heavens, his feet moving on instinct. And then crack. His boot struck a rock buried in the soil. He stumbled, arms flailing, and fell hard to the ground. The journal flew from his hands, tumbling into a patch of wild lavender. Elias lay there stunned for a moment, the wind knocked from his lungs. Above him, the stars continued their slow, silent dance. A soft voice broke the stillness. "Stargazing with your feet again, Elias." He turned his head to see a figure approaching with a lantern. It was Calla, the healer's daughter. She had grown into a quiet, thoughtful woman with sharp eyes and a calming presence. Elias hadn't spoken to her in years. "Ah yes," he said, brushing dust from his robes, "they're quite beautiful tonight." Calla smiled gently and helped him to his feet. "They always are. But so is the ground you walk on." He chuckled awkwardly, retrieving his journal. "I suppose I got a little too lost in the sky." As they stood in the moonlight, Calla tilted her head and studied him. "You used to love the earth too. Do you remember how we used to pick figs behind the temple? You called them sweet stars." Elias blinked. He hadn't thought of that in decades. They stood in silence for a moment. The breeze carried the scent of salt from the sea, and the soft chirping of night insects filled the air. "You don't have to choose, you know," she said quietly. "The stars will always be there. But so will we." And then, without another word, she turned and walked back toward the village, her lantern bobbing like a firefly. Elias remained still. His heart felt full and hollow all at once. He looked up at the constellations, still glowing, still majestic, and then he looked down at the path before him. Maybe, just maybe, he had been looking in only one direction for too long. The morning light crept into Elias Thorne's cottage in slow, golden waves. For the first time in years, he had fallen asleep before dawn, and even more surprisingly, slept soundly through the night. No scribbled notes, no hours spent charting the motion of Mars. Just dreams, unfamiliar, grounded dreams. He awoke to a world bathed in sun. A sparrow chirped from the edge of his windowsill. The scent of fresh bread drifted through his window, mingling with the perfume of rosemary growing outside. Elias blinked against the brightness, shielding his eyes like a man stepping into another world. And perhaps, in a way, he was. His body felt heavier in daylight, less like the featherweight traveler of stars, more like a real man with real weight and bones and breath. As he stood and dressed, a strange mixture of guilt and anticipation filled his chest. What did I miss in the sky last night? He wondered. But that thought was soon drowned out by another, quieter voice. What have I been missing down here? He stepped outside for the first time in months during daylight. The village of Mirian was alive. Children ran barefoot through dust paths, a pair of old women were hanging linens, chatting about gossip as they beat the fabric against stone. The scent of honey cakes and orange blossom filled the square. It was loud, colorful, textured, and overwhelming. "Elias!" A voice called cheerfully. It was Calla again, this time without her lantern. She stood beneath a fig tree, shading her eyes with one hand. "Come. You're just in time for breakfast." Still stunned by the daylight world, he followed her to her home, which was tucked behind a cluster of pomegranate trees. There, under a grapevine canopy, a table was already set. Crusty bread, a will of cheese, a clay pot of steaming coffee, olives, sliced melon, and fig preserves. It was a feast, one that Elias realized he hadn't had in years. A man joined them at the table, introducing himself as Brennan, Calla's older brother. He was a carpenter, his hands rough and strong, but his voice soft. "I've seen you on the hills," he said with a grin. "Thought you might float away one night and become a star yourself." They laughed together, and to Elias' surprise, he laughed too. It had been so long since his chest moved with joy rather than awe. When he bit into the bread, fresh, warm, crunchy on the outside, it brought tears to his eyes. Not because of the taste, but because of the memory of his mother's kitchen, of a simpler time. As they ate, Calla asked, "What did you see last night?" Elias hesitated. "The moon was orange. I followed it toward the cliffs. I fell." Brennan chuckled. "Fell from the sky, Ed. Even stars stumble." They all smiled, but then Elias turned solemn. "I've spent so many years looking up, I think I forgot what it means to live down here." There was a pause. The kind of pause that held truth in its silence. Calla reached across the table and placed a hand gently on his. "Then let us show you." And so began a day unlike any Elias had known for decades. They walked together through the village. Children asked him questions about the stars. Why are some red? Do they move? Are there really lions in the sky? And for once, he didn't just answer with facts, but with wonder. He told them stories of Orion and Cassiopeia, of Artemis and her hunt, blending myth and science until their eyes sparkled like constellations themselves. Later, they passed by the market, where a woman named Irene sold fruit and herbs. She hadn't seen Elias in years and nearly dropped her basket when she recognized him. "By the gods! I thought you turned to stardust." She laughed, handing him a fig and insisting he take more. "You owe us some stories." Near the town square, a group of musicians were playing a slow, cheerful tune. Brennan urged Elias to sit on a bench and just listen. And he did. He listened to the strings, to the flutes, to the laughter. And for the first time, he felt part of it, not an observer orbiting from afar, but a man with 2 feet planted on soft, sun-warmed soil. That evening, as golden dusk returned to kiss the village roofs, Elias did not climb his hill. He stayed on the ground, beneath the grapevine, watching the stars appear slowly from his seat. He felt no anxiety, no fear of missing out on some celestial alignment. Instead, he felt full his belly, his heart, his soul. The constellations still called to him, yes. But now, so did the earth. And somewhere deep inside, a question bloomed. Can a man belong to both the sky and the soil? He didn't have the answer yet. But tomorrow, he would rise with the sun again. As dusk fell upon the village of Mirian once more, the sky transformed into its familiar deep velvet. Stars blinked awake, one by one, like lanterns rekindled in the heavens. But tonight, Elias Thorne was not alone in greeting them. Calla and Brennan had invited him to join the villagers by the great communal fire, a tradition that had carried through generations. It was held only once a month, on the night when the moon reached its fullest and cast silver shadows across the land. Elias had forgotten it even existed. "Sit here," Calla gestured to a blanket laid near the fire, just beside the children who were toasting almonds and figs on sticks. The warmth of the flames, the distant sound of a lyre, and the low hum of evening conversation formed a melody more comforting than any lullaby. Elias settled in. His robe, once stiff from solitude, now bore the scent of wood smoke and sun-warmed herbs. As villagers gathered, they began sharing tales, old myths, family legends, and dreams spoken aloud. When his turn came, the crowd quieted. All eyes turned to the once elusive man who had lived in the shadows of the cosmos. "I used to believe," Elias began slowly, "that everything worth knowing was above us. That the earth had nothing new to offer me." He looked up. The sky was pristine, strewn with constellations he had charted 100 times. But now he saw them differently, not as scientific patterns, but as old friends with stories etched in light. "But I was wrong," he continued, his voice growing steadier. "There is a rhythm here, a quiet wonder I forgot to hear." A murmur of agreement ran through the crowd. Even the children stilled, leaning closer. "You see, the stars may tell us when the seasons shift. But it is the wind that carries the first scent of autumn. The stars may map the sky, but it is the soil that remembers every step we take. And sometimes, we get so busy looking up, we forget to live." The fire popped gently, as if in applause. A silence followed, not the awkward kind, but one filled with shared understanding. Then someone began to sing a soft melody, and others joined in. Elias did not know the words. But the song was about home, and that was enough. Later that night, Calla approached him as the fire dwindled. "You're different," she said simply. "I feel it," Elias admitted. "But I don't know what to do with it." "You don't have to do anything," she replied. "Just keep showing up." The next morning, Elias woke early again. This time, he didn't feel like he had missed the stars. Instead, he looked forward to something else entirely: the scent of baking bread, the buzz of bees in the lavender bushes, the sound of villagers beginning their day. He decided to take a walk alone, not through the hills this time, but through the heart of the village. At the bakery, Lyra's younger sister Malis recognized him. "Elias?" "It can't be," she blinked, flour dusting her cheeks. "Did you finally return from the stars?" He chuckled. "Just visiting Earth for a while." She wrapped him a warm honey bun, placing it gently into his hand. "Then welcome back." Further along the path, he passed the schoolhouse where children practiced reading under an olive tree. One child waved. Another ran up to him. "Mr. Elias, do you think stars can fall down?" He crouched, meeting the boy's eyes. "Sometimes, when we're not careful, we fall into the sky ourselves." The boy laughed, not quite understanding, but delighting in the idea anyway. That evening, as the village calmed into golden stillness, Elias returned to his old hill. This time, though, he brought company. Calla, Brennan, and even a few curious children followed him. He laid out his journal and began pointing at the sky, not in solitude, but in shared wonder. "That's Orion," he said. "A hunter among the stars. Does he protect us?" one girl asked. Elias smiled. "He watches. Just like you watched me fall yesterday." They laughed. And just like that, the stars were no longer distant mysteries to be solved. They were conversation starters, bridges between people, reminders of how small we are and yet how connected we can be. Later, as the group descended back toward the village, Elias lingered. Alone for just a moment, he looked up and whispered, "I still love you." He wasn't sure if he was speaking to the stars or to something deeper within himself. But as he turned and walked back down the hill, he didn't look back. He didn't need to. The stars would still be there tomorrow night. And now, so would he. The days passed more gently for Elias Thorne now. He began to walk the village paths each morning, no longer a ghost seen only by the moon. Children greeted him by name, shopkeepers saved the choicest fruit for him, and Calla often joined him for tea under the fig tree. The stars, once his sole companions, were now visitors welcomed each night, but not worshipped. He still admired them, still read their patterns in his journal. But now, his life stretched in two directions, upward, yes, but also outward, and inward. It was on such a morning, cool and bright, that a messenger arrived. He was a young man from the city, riding a dusty horse, holding a sealed scroll. The villagers gathered around as he asked, "Who among you is Elias Thorne?" Elias raised a brow and stepped forward. The scroll was old. Its parchment was creased and yellowed at the edges, and the wax seal bore a symbol he hadn't seen in years, a crescent moon crossed by a feather. His hands trembled as he broke the seal. Elias. If you are reading this, it means the stars have not yet taken you. I write with a strange request, and perhaps, a plea. You once studied with me, many years ago, at the Academy of Celestial Thought in Caldera. Do you remember? Do you remember the Tower of Glass? The echoing halls? The nights we argued over Saturn's rings? We have need of you. Something is happening in the skies, something none of us understand. The stars have begun to shift. New ones are appearing. Old ones vanishing. The constellations no longer match the charts. We believe the universe is speaking, Elias. but we no longer understand its language. Come back. Even if only for a short while. Professor Marin. Asterisk. Elias stood frozen. The villagers watched him carefully. Kala stepped beside him. Who is it from? He showed her the seal. Caldeira. My old teacher. He's asking for help. She tilted her head. Will you go? He didn't answer. Not yet. That night, Elias returned to his hill, but not for stargazing. He opened his old journals, filled with ink-drawn maps of the heavens, calculations, forgotten theories. And as he flipped through them, memories poured forth like starlight. He remembered the academy, its tall, spiraled towers, the smell of parchment and oil lamps, the sound of debate echoing through domed chambers. He had been brilliant there. Respected. Even envied. But he had also been hollow. Hungry for answers so far away that he had let everything near him drift beyond reach. Was he ready to go back? Was he ready to risk losing the grounded life he had just begun to build again? Later, as he wandered alone through the olive groves, he stumbled upon something unexpected, a small stone shrine half covered in ivy. He had passed this place countless times but had never seen it in daylight. On the stone surface was an inscription in old script. Look upward and forget. Look inward and remember. But only when you look both ways. Do you begin to see? He traced the carved letters with his fingers, a shiver rising on his arms. It felt like a message not just from the past, but from the stars themselves. When he returned to the village, Kala was waiting by the fire. You've already decided, haven't you? She asked. Elias nodded slowly. I have to go. But not forever. I know, she said, her voice steady. But you must promise something. Anything. When you return, she looked at him directly, return fully. Don't bring only the stars. Bring yourself. The next morning, the village gathered to see him off. Brennan handed him a satchel with bread, dried figs, a new journal, and a sturdy walking stick. For the road, he said gruffly, though his eyes were misted. The children gave him a folded parchment, a star map drawn with colored chalks. So you don't forget where you came from, one of them said. Kala walked with him to the edge of the valley. They stood together in silence for a long while. Then she whispered, don't chase only the sky, Elias. Chase what it awakens in you. With a heavy but hopeful heart, Elias turned and began the long walk toward Caldeira. And as he crested the hill, the morning sun struck the path before him in golden brilliance, and behind him, the village of Mirian shimmered in the valley like a memory not yet ready to fade. The road to Caldeira was long and winding. Stretching across valleys, cutting through misty pine forests, and climbing along sheer mountain cliffs. It was as if nature itself tested Elias Thorne's resolve with every step. But Elias had changed. This time, he didn't walk with eyes fixed on the sky. He watched the trail, listened to birdsong, and marveled at how the morning light shimmered through dew-speckled leaves. After 5 days of travel, the ivory towers of Caldera rose in the distance like ancient bones piercing the horizon. The Academy of Celestial Thought stood atop a rocky promontory overlooking the sea, a place both isolated and elevated, as if suspended between earth and sky. Elias had spent his youth here, surrounded by minds as restless as his own. It was where he had first dreamed of mapping the soul of the cosmos. But time had not left Caldera untouched. Its once bright stone walls were weathered now, vines creeping higher than he remembered. The banners of deep blue silk, adorned with stars and sigils, hung limp in the still air. It was quieter than he expected. As he crossed the gate, a voice echoed from above. Elias Thorne, the man who once asked if Saturn wept. Elias looked up, shielding his eyes. A figure descended the stairs slowly, robes of midnight blue, gray hair braided with silver thread, and a sharp gaze behind half-moon spectacles. "Professor Marin," Elias said, bowing slightly. "You've aged well," Marin replied. "But more importantly, you've returned." They embraced awkwardly, more scholars than friends, but the connection was genuine. Inside the tower, the familiar scent of aged parchment, candle wax, and copper instruments filled Elias' lungs. He followed Marin into the grand observatory, where a giant mechanical orrery still rotated with rhythmic clicks, modeling the planet's movement. Marin didn't waste time. "We first noticed it 3 months ago," he said, unrolling a fresh star map. A new point of light, faint but persistent, appearing near the edge of Lyra. "At first, we thought it a comet, but it hasn't moved." Then, 2 weeks later, stars in Scorpius vanished. Vanished. Elias frowned. "How can a star vanish?" "That's the question," Marin replied grimly. He lit a candle and placed it beneath a brass dome etched with constellations. "Elias, these are not observational errors. The patterns are shifting. Stars we've known for centuries are realigning. Some scholars are calling it a celestial migration. Others think it's a warning." "A warning from what?" Elias asked. "Perhaps the universe itself." That night, Elias was offered his old chamber. The door creaked just the same. Dust lingered in the corners, and on the shelf still sat the wooden box he'd carved as a student, full of quartz fragments and dried ink pots. He smiled faintly and opened the window. But when he looked to the sky, he froze. There it was. A new star, just as Marin described, pale and pulsing like a heartbeat. And somehow, familiar. His pulse quickened. He scribbled notes, comparisons, historical charts, cross-references. Hours passed. The sky shifted. The night deepened. Just before dawn, there was a knock at his door. He opened it to find a woman he had not seen in 2 decades. "Elias," she said. "I thought you'd forgotten me." Her name was Saren Vale, once his closest companion, rival, and something more. Brilliant, unpredictable, with storm-gray eyes and a mind sharp as starlight. "Saren," he murmured, stunned. "You left without saying goodbye," she said. "I didn't think I'd return," he admitted. She studied him, unblinking. "You always thought the stars mattered more than people." Elias winced. "But you're here now," she added, stepping inside. "And so are the stars. Changing. Shifting. We think it's connected to something ancient. Something buried under this very tower." Elias blinked. "Buried?" She nodded. "There's a chamber, sealed for centuries, below the academy. Only recently rediscovered during a landslide. Inside, we found inscriptions. Glyphs that predate even the old stargazers. Some scholars think it was built by those who knew the sky was alive." For a moment, silence hung like fog. Then Saren said softly, "Come with me tomorrow. I want to show you." And in the stillness, Elias knew, this wasn't just a return. This was the beginning of something new. A riddle written in light. A path that led not just upward but inward, and deep below. By dawn, a thin mist blanketed the cliffs of Caldera. The sea below murmured quietly, as if it, too, held its breath for what was about to unfold. Elias Thorne barely slept. His mind had been set ablaze by Saren's words, a hidden chamber beneath the tower. In all his years at the academy, he had never heard of such a place. If it held inscriptions that spoke of a sky in motion, of stars with intention, it would change not just astronomy, but philosophy, memory, and perhaps even fate. Saren met him in the lower courtyard, cloaked in grey. She carried a torch, though daylight had already begun to break. "This way," she whispered, leading him through a narrow arch hidden behind ivy-covered stone. They descended spiral stairs carved directly into the rock. The air grew cooler with each step, tinged with salt and ancient dust. The deeper they went, the more silent the world became, until even their footsteps seemed swallowed by the stillness. After what felt like an hour, they reached the great iron door, half sunken and sealed by a mechanism of brass rings and star-shaped etchings. "I spent months deciphering the locking sequence," Saren said. "It corresponds to stellar alignments. It only opens at certain hours when the stars above form a mirrored pattern to those carved on the surface." She twisted 3 rings slowly. A low groan echoed from within, like the door was waking from centuries of slumber. With a final metallic click, the chamber yawned open. Torchlight spilled into a vast hall lined with obsidian walls that reflected their flickering light like distant galaxies. Symbols shimmered faintly, glyphs not from any known language, yet strangely resonant. "What is this place?" Elias whispered. Some think it's a temple, Saren replied. Others say it's older. That it predates language, perhaps built by a civilization whose knowledge of the stars wasn't observational but relational. They moved forward slowly, passing columns etched with constellations long thought mythological. One depicted a swirling pattern of stars, descending toward a central void, a spiral, much like the galaxy itself. Then, at the chamber's heart, stood a pedestal. On it lay a circular stone disc, no larger than a dinner plate, covered in grooves and tiny points of silver inlaid like miniature stars. This is what's causing the new star, Saren said. We call it the ether disk. Elias approached, mesmerized. When he hovered his hand above it, the silver points began to glow faintly. It responds to proximity, Saren continued. And we believe it may be a kind of celestial map, not of where stars are, but where they will be. Elias felt a deep pull within him. A memory stirred something long buried. My grandfather, he murmured. He once told me of a story about an ancient instrument hidden beneath the earth, capable of guiding the heavens themselves. I thought it was myth. Perhaps myth is just memory too old to trust, Saren replied. They spent hours studying the disk. Its markings didn't match any constellation known in modern charts. But when Elias rotated it, aligning a spiral groove with the current star positions, a subtle humming filled the chamber. Then, in a flash, the lights embedded in the disk rearranged, forming a new pattern. Saren gasped. That's the new star. And more. Indeed, several lights lit up that had not yet appeared in the night sky. It's predicting future appearances, Elias said. It's not reacting to the sky, it's writing it. They sat in stunned silence. This was no tool of navigation. This was a mechanism of change. That night, back in his quarters, Elias could not stop staring at the stars from the observatory. They looked different now. Less like distant, cold fire and more like ancient signals, rippling outward, looking for someone to answer. He opened his journal and wrote. What if the stars do not simply burn? What if they remember? What if they choose to be seen at a time and in a place only when the right eyes are watching? His candle burned low. As he closed his journal, he felt a sensation he had not known in years, not the quiet awe of scientific curiosity, but something deeper, more primal. 3 days passed since Elias and Saren had entered the hidden chamber beneath Caldera. But the memory of the ether disk lingered in Elias's mind like a low, persistent hum. Each night, he observed the sky through the grand observatory dome, watching the stars shift ever so slightly, like dancers rehearsing unfamiliar steps. The new star near Lyra, dubbed the Eye of Thorn by students, had grown brighter, almost pulsing with intention. But not everyone welcomed the discovery. Word of Elias's findings spread quickly through the Academy's faculty halls, and with it came whispers, some intrigued, some fearful, others downright hostile. At breakfast in the Scholars' Hall, Master Cordain, a rigid, traditionalist professor of celestial mechanics, approached Elias with narrowed eyes. "I heard you've been exploring fairy tales in the basement," Cordain said, voice dripping with condescension. "Do be careful not to mistake poetic artifacts for scientific truth." Elias stayed calm. The disk responds to stellar alignments. It predicted the star we now see with unaided eyes. "A coincidence," Cordain snapped. "Or worse, confirmation bias." "The stars do not change, Thorn. They burn. They do not think." "But what if they do?" Saren interjected as she approached from the opposite side. "What if we've spent centuries observing the sky without ever truly listening to it?" "Enough mysticism," Cordain muttered and walked off, muttering about superstition. That night, Saren found Elias in the old archives, thumbing through forbidden scrolls, texts that predated even the founding of Caldera. She placed a hand on the table beside him and unrolled a parchment written in an archaic tongue. "Translated it last night," she said. "It mentions the ether disk. But they called it the Resonant Oracle. It was said to be a gift, left by the skybound ones." Elias looked up. "Skybound, as in?" Saren hesitated. "Not gods." "Not exactly. But travelers. Beings who moved between stars the way we move between villages. They passed through this world, once left relics. The chamber. The disk. Warnings." The word settled like ash in Elias's chest. "Warnings." She pointed to a passage. "When the eye awakens, and the patterns break, the line between shall weaken." "I don't understand," he said. "We think it refers to dimensions. The boundary between what is seen and what is veiled. If the stars realign in this way, it might mean something is breaking through." A deep silence filled the chamber. Suddenly, the floor trembled. Books fell from the shelves. Far above them, a loud clang echoed down the tower like the sound of iron striking stone. They rushed upward, taking the spiraling staircase 2 steps at a time. By the time they reached the observatory, several students were already there, pointing skyward. A new star had appeared. Not one, in fact. 3. Arranged in a triangular formation around the Eye of Thorn. Professor Marin arrived, breathless. "It's begun." "What has?" Elias asked. "The next phase," Marin said. "I believe we're watching a celestial gate unlock." The following morning, Caldera was in turmoil. Some scholars demanded the observatory be shut down, afraid that the study of the disk would attract destructive cosmic forces. Others called for Elias to be expelled, blaming him for disturbing the silence. But Marin protected him. Saren stood by him. and students began sneaking him notes under his door, messages of awe and wonder. Don't let them stop you. The stars are more alive than anything we've studied. I saw the eye blink. My dreams have changed. I think the sky is speaking to all of us. Elias knew there was no turning back. So he and Saren returned to the hidden chamber. This time, they weren't alone. Marin accompanied them, carrying an old tome known only as the Astrarium Codex, rumored to contain ancient predictions recorded by star watchers who claimed to receive visions rather than data. Before the pedestal, Elias placed both hands over the disc. This time, he did not hesitate. The silver grooves flared brightly. A pulse of warmth flowed up his arms, through his chest, into his eyes. He saw stars moving not across space, but through time. He saw constellations collapse and reform. He saw a spiral spinning faster and faster. And then he saw a dark shape blotting out the heavens. A vast shadow, moving with terrible grace. He staggered back, gasping. Saren caught him. What did you see? She asked. Elias stared at her. I think, he said slowly, I think something is returning. The chamber beneath Caldera hummed with an otherworldly energy as Elias Thorne, Saren Vale, and Professor Marin stood before the glowing ether disk. The silver points of light pulsed rhythmically, casting dancing shadows on the obsidian walls, like breathing constellations trapped underground. Marin carefully opened the ancient tome, the Astrarium Codex, its pages brittle yet filled with swirling scripts and diagrams of stars, gates, and cosmic pathways. The Gate of Stars, Marin whispered reverently, tracing a diagram depicting a vast portal framed by spiraling constellations. The Codex warns, Saren said, her voice low, that opening the gate could allow passage between dimensions. Not just to explore the universe but to let something come through. Elias's gaze lingered on the disk. He remembered the vision, the shadow blotting out the sky, the swirling spiral spinning faster. The ominous message that something was returning from beyond. We need to understand what lies on the other side, Elias said, before we decide whether to open or seal the gate. But each time the disk pulses, the stars above shift, Saren warned. The more we study it, the more unstable the sky becomes. Marin nodded gravely. Our greatest minds are divided. Some want to stop all research. Others believe this is a doorway to knowledge beyond imagining. Suddenly, the chamber trembled. A deep resonance filled the air, vibrating through stone and bone alike. Prepare yourselves, Marin said, voice strained. The gate is responding. They each placed a hand upon the disc. A surge of light exploded outward, and the chamber was flooded with visions. Elias saw swirling galaxies folding into themselves, a vast network of stars connected by shimmering threads of energy. He saw ancient civilizations watching the skies, recording cosmic events not just as data, but as prophecy. And then, a figure appeared shrouded in starfire, neither human nor alien, its eyes like twin novas. "Guardian of the gate," Elias whispered. The vision faded, leaving a profound silence. When the light dimmed, Elias turned to his companions, breathless. "The gate is alive," he said. "It senses us. And it watches." Saren shivered. "We may not be the only ones aware of it." Days turned into restless nights as the Academy debated. Elias, Saren, and Marin worked feverishly to decode the codex, searching for clues to control or communicate with the gate. Yet strange occurrences unsettled Caldera. Instruments malfunctioned inexplicably. Lights flickered. Shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally in the moonlight. One evening, Elias received a message written in the stars themselves. A pattern, a code woven into the constellation Cassiopeia. It spelled a warning. "Do not open. The veil is thin. The Watchers return." The Watchers were creatures of legend, beings said to exist beyond mortal perception, guardians, or perhaps jailers of cosmic balance. Now, their return seemed imminent. Faced with this dread, Elias found himself torn. Was humanity ready to confront these ancient powers? Or would the gate bring destruction beyond imagining? What will Elias decide? Will they open the gate seeking enlightenment? Or seal it forever, sacrificing knowledge for safety? The air in Caldera had grown heavy. Days before, the first ripple had brushed against the village, an unnatural chill that stole warmth from the sun and whispered on the wind like an ancient sigh. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, twisting like dark fingers across stone walls and cobbled streets. Elias Thorne stood at the peak of the Academy's highest tower, staring out at the horizon where stars blinked strangely, some dimming, others glowing fiercely, and new lights flickering in impossible places. Beside him, Saren Vale's face was grim, her usually sharp eyes clouded with concern. "The veil is thinning," she said softly. Elias nodded. "We felt it in the chamber. The gate reacts to us and something else." Suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the dawn. They rushed down, meeting the chaos erupting in the village square. Villagers ran in terror, pointing at the sky where shadows seemed to coil and writhe. A figure emerged from the darkness, tall, cloaked in swirling mists that shimmered like stars themselves. Its eyes glowed like twin galaxies, impossible and terrifying. "The Watcher," Marin whispered, appearing behind Elias and Saren. The creature's voice was a cold ripple in the air. "You who awaken the gate, beware. The stars are no longer yours to command." Elias stepped forward, heart pounding. "We seek only understanding." The Watcher's gaze pierced him. "Understanding comes at a price. Will you pay it?" From the crowd, a child cried out, clutching a faded star map. Elias felt a surge of protectiveness. He whispered to Saren, "We have to close the gate before more come through." They raced to the chamber, the ether disk pulsing wildly, fracturing light into shards. But the gate resisted, responding to the growing fear and discord. Saren scanned the codex desperately. "There is a ritual," she said. "A way to restore the veil. But it requires sacrifice, knowledge, and something deeply personal." Elias's mind flashed to his solitary years, his lost love, his rediscovered village ties. As they prepared the ritual, mysterious allies arrived, scholars who had secretly studied the gate, and even old friends from Elias's past, including Saren's brother, Kale, a gifted linguist who could decipher the codex's final cipher. Together, they formed a fragile coalition, blending science, myth, and courage. The night of the ritual came, beneath the sky swirling with unnatural light. Elias stood at the center, reciting incantations from the codex, surrounded by a circle of ancient stones. The gate flared, warping space and time. Visions flooded Elias's mind, stars collapsing, worlds ending, and rebirths beginning. With a final, thunderous pulse, the gate sealed. Silence. The stars realigned. And in the quiet, Elias knew the battle was far from over. The ritual had ended, but the echoes of its power still vibrated through Caldera. Elias Thorne stood in the great hall of the academy, surrounded by faces pale with exhaustion and eyes wide with the weight of what they had witnessed. The gate had closed, but the price was evident everywhere. The ancient stones in the chamber were cracked, shards of obsidian glimmering like fallen stars scattered across the floor. The ether disk lay silent, its silver points dimmed, but the air still hummed faintly, as if the universe itself were holding its breath. Elias's hand trembled as he reached down to touch the disk. A cold shiver ran through him. He remembered the vision's worlds ending, stars dying, and something darker lurking beyond the veil. "Is it truly over?" Saren asked softly, stepping beside him. Before Elias could answer, a sudden movement caught his eye. From the shadowed doorway emerged a figure cloaked in deep blue. Kale, Saren's brother. His face was etched with lines of worry, and in his hands, he held a small, intricately carved box. "I found this in the archives," Kale said, voice low. "It wasn't part of the ritual, but it might explain what we've truly awakened." Elias gestured for him to open it. Inside lay a crystal prism, fractured yet radiant, and beneath it, a folded parchment sealed with the emblem of the skybound ones. Elias carefully broke the seal. The parchment was a letter, a message from those ancient travelers, warning of a cycle. When the gate opens, the balance between worlds shifts. The veil weakens. And with each opening, the scars deepen. Elias felt a pang of dread. "Scars," he whispered. Kale nodded. "Not just on the sky, but here, on us. The world will never be the same." Meanwhile, outside the academy, the village felt the aftermath. Crops wilted beneath a pale sun. Strange lights flickered at twilight. Some villagers fell ill with fevers, their dreams haunted by flickering stars and whispering shadows. Kala, now acting as a healer, worked tirelessly, tending to the afflicted. She sought Elias out one evening. "We're paying the price," she said, worry creasing her brow. The gate was meant to be sealed forever. Elias's heart ached. "I thought we were saving the future." "Sometimes, saving one future means sacrificing another," Calla replied gently. That night, Elias returned to the hidden chamber alone. The obsidian walls glistened faintly under torchlight. He sat before the disk, tracing the silver points with trembling fingers. He thought of Lyra, the baker's daughter he once loved, whose laughter still echoed faintly in his memories. He thought of Calla, who had become his anchor to this world. And he thought of Saren and Kale, his companions in this celestial quest. The stars outside the chamber window shimmered with eerie light. Elias whispered to the dark sky, "What do you want from us? What is the true cost?" A cold breeze swept through the chamber, carrying a whisper that only he could hear. "Balance demands sacrifice. Are you willing?" The weight of the universe pressed heavily on Elias Thorne as he sat alone beneath the shimmering dome of Caldeira's observatory. Outside, the stars glittered in cold silence, but inside, his mind roiled like a stormy sea. The letter from the skybound ones lay open on the table before him. Words burned into his soul, warnings of cycles, sacrifices, and scars that would mark not only the heavens but the hearts of mortals. A faint knock startled him. Saren Vale entered quietly, her eyes reflecting the flicker of candlelight and the depths of shared burdens. "Elias," she began, hesitating, "we can't undo what's been done. The gate pulses beneath us still, waiting." He sighed. "I don't know if I can live with this choice." She stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You're not alone in this." Their eyes met, a moment heavy with unspoken memories, rivalry, friendship, and something deeper, threaded through years of shared discovery and loss. Meanwhile, whispers from the village grew louder. The veil's thinning brought strange dreams and visions to many. Children spoke of voices in the stars. Elders murmured of ancient prophecies. Calla, ever the healer, sought Elias once more. "The villagers are frightened," she said, her voice steady but eyes troubled. "Some want to flee, others want to fight. But none understand." Elias nodded. "And how do we guide them through this?" Calla's gaze was fierce. "By choosing a path. By showing strength." Back in the chamber, Elias opened the Astrarium Codex again. He traced the diagram, celestial maps intertwined with symbols of sacrifice, rebirth, and balance. A choice loomed before him. To open the gate fully, embracing the unknown and risking chaos, potentially gaining knowledge to save or doom humanity. Or to seal the gate forever, preserving safety but losing the chance to understand the cosmic forces at play. That night, as the village slept uneasily beneath the star-shifted sky, Elias walked to the cliffside overlooking the sea. The moon cast silver light on the restless waves, mirroring the turmoil within him. He thought of Lyra's laughter, distant but alive in his heart. He thought of Kala's unwavering courage. He thought of Saren's relentless pursuit of truth. And he thought of the stars themselves, ancient, beautiful, and terrifying. A soft voice whispered on the wind, as if the universe itself spoke through the rustling leaves. Balance demands sacrifice. Elias clenched his fists. He knew what he must do. The following dawn, the academy gathered. Elias stepped forward, his voice clear and resolute. We have awakened a power greater than any of us imagined. The gate is not merely a passage, it is a test. A challenge from the cosmos. He paused, meeting the eyes of each scholar, student, and villager. We will open the gate. Not recklessly, but prepared to face whatever waits beyond. To seek knowledge that may save us all. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Saren stepped beside him, adding, "And we will not face it alone. Together, we will balance the light and dark, the known and unknown." As preparations began, Elias felt the weight ease, replaced by a fierce determination. The stars awaited. And so did destiny. The moment had come. The grand chamber beneath Caldera shimmered with ethereal light as Elias Thorne, Saren Vale, Professor Marin, and their gathered allies prepared to open the gate of stars fully. The ether disk pulsed with vibrant energy, alive as never before, weaving patterns that danced like living constellations. Outside, the village of Mirian waited, breaths held, hearts trembling beneath the shifting sky. The stars above flickered nervously, as if aware of the thin boundary between worlds about to be crossed. Elias stepped forward, placing his hands on the disk. His eyes closed as the pulse coursed through him, a current of light, knowledge, and ancient power. Visions flooded his mind. He saw the skybound ones, travelers between worlds, guardians of cosmic balance. They had built the chamber, the disk, and the gate not as weapons, but as bridges between realms of existence. He saw stars born and dying in eternal cycles, weaving a vast tapestry of creation and destruction. He felt the pulse of the universe, an endless dance of light and shadow, chaos and order. And then, he saw the choice. To step through the gate, to embrace the unknown and risk everything for knowledge and growth. Or to close the gate forever, preserving the fragile balance but forsaking the future. Elias's heart thundered. Beside him, Saren's voice whispered, "Whatever you choose, we face it together." He opened his eyes, shimmering with resolve. "I choose to step forward," he declared. With a surge of energy, the gate opened, a swirling vortex of starlight and shadow. The chamber filled with the scent of ozone and the hum of infinite possibilities. Elias took the first step and was followed by Saren, Marin, and the others. They passed through the veil into a realm beyond time and space, a place where stars sang with voices like thunder and silence, where past, present, and future intertwined. Here, Elias learned the greatest secret: the stars were not distant, cold spheres, but living beings connected to every soul, every moment. The universe was alive, and they were part of its eternal dance. When they returned to Caldera, the gate closed behind them, but the world had changed. The veil had been restored, not sealed, but balanced. The scars remained, but they were marks of growth, of understanding. Elias looked to the sky, now vibrant and alive, and smiled. He knew that the journey was never truly over, because the stars would always call. And as long as they did, humanity would keep reaching toward light, toward knowledge, toward the infinite. Title: The Astronomer's Gate, A Journey Beyond the Stars. Description: In the quiet village of Mirian, Elias Thorne, a solitary astronomer obsessed with the stars, discovers an ancient cosmic secret buried beneath the Academy of Celestial Thought. As mysterious shifts in the night sky awaken a hidden gate between worlds, Elias must confront ancient beings, unravel celestial mysteries, and make a choice that could change humanity's destiny forever. Join Elias, Saren, and their allies on an epic journey that blurs the line between science and myth, reality and the unknown, in this tale of sacrifice, discovery, and the eternal dance of the stars.